A Lake Erie Island resort becomes the site of a deadly terrace collapse. Volunteers care for the injured.
Well, there's blood and guts all over, and you have to stay focused.
And try to free those trapped inside the fallen concrete structure. As emergency medical crews take to the air.
For a trauma patient, they have a golden hour where you need to get them to the trauma centers.
They realize that if they're to save lives, they are in a race against time. The village of Put-in Bay in Middle Bass Island lays 6 miles off Ohio's coast in Lake Erie. A 30-minute ride on the ferry. With only 40 year-round residents, remote Middle Bass Island becomes a hotspot each summer as thousands of visitors stream in. For most, their destination is the Lonz Winery. The weathered limestone and brick building was built in 1866. Over the years, additions were made, including a lakefront terrace in 1964. Unfortunately, Ohio law does not require inspections of existing structures, regardless of age or wear. No one knew the dangerous condition of the terrace. A party on July 1st, 2000 was one of the last big events at the winery. The state of Ohio planned to purchase the property and turn it into a park. "25-year-old Beth Roach joined several friends on the terrace to celebrate the long weekend.
The weather was great. I remember it was a beautiful day. And I just remember the dance floor was busy. It was, you know, we were just people watching and taking it all in and having a drink and just kind of going with the flow of things.
Ken and JoEllen Ruehle were enjoying the weekend with friends.
Our friends were up there with us, and a lot of people from our hometown were there. And we were really enjoying the situation. They had a band and a great company, the people, and enjoying ourselves. And didn't think that anything was going to happen to us that we didn't appreciate or didn't like that day.
Linda Shull was enjoying a romantic getaway with her fiancé, far away from her hectic career as a nurse.
Every year around July 4th was an annual event for a group of friends to go over to Middle Bass and go to the winery, listen to the band, have a good time. So it's been a lot of fun.
Unbeknownst to the partygoers, disaster lurked beneath their feet. A crack in the concrete terrace that widened as the afternoon wore on. From their perspective, the winery terrace appeared to be the best spot on the island.
I heard this loud rumble, like thunder, and then I saw the crack. And the crack was just coming right towards me, right towards me. And it all happened so fast. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, your arms flow up over your head, everybody just kind of drops, and too fast to yell, too fast to jump, too fast to warn anybody, push anybody out of the way, jump out of the way. You just, one minute you're standing there talking, the next minute you're on the ground, you know, in the midst of a lot of rubble, chaos, people, you know. It happened that fast.
With no warning, the Lonz Winery terrace had collapsed.
One of my most vivid memories, visuals, is a visual I still see from time to time. I'll never forget this, but, and I can't imagine what it was like for them, but the people that didn't fall, that were right on the edge, just the looks on their faces as they were looking down over everything, that was very poignant to me, because they were just horrified. And I can't imagine what they were seeing, because all I could see was just the small area around me, because I was on the ground, so I couldn't see the whole span.
It was impossible to know how many people were buried under the avalanche of rubble. Tables and chairs, twisted rebar, and jagged hunks of concrete plunged along with them, 20 feet into an unused wine cellar. It was a scene that defied comprehension.
It seemed like everything was just in slow motion. And looking down, first of all, just the depth and how far those people were. They were hurt and they were crying. And then you could see men like pushing and moving the concrete, and there was a pot machine. And I mean, you could just see all this chaos and these people that were hurt. It was just stunning, just stunning.
JoEllen and her husband Ken were both trapped beneath the rubble. When she regained consciousness, JoEllen could barely breathe.
There was a big stone across a big slab over my leg, and I remember when I came to, I looked up and all I seen was the sky up above. And then I went to yell help, and nothing came out of my lungs at all. And it scared me really bad, because I thought, how am I going to be found? And then I thought, I can't lay here and die. And so I tried to pull my leg out from underneath the concrete, and it wasn't going to come out real well. And then I looked down, and my friend was laying underneath the slab, and he didn't move or anything. And I thought, oh, I've got to get out of here. I'm going to die.
Dozens of injured victims were trapped. Slabs of unstable concrete loomed above them. The nearest hospital was at least 30 minutes by boat across Lake Erie.
Emergency?
The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office took the call.
Okay, how many people are hurt?
The dispatcher called the emergency medical service in the village of Put-in-Bay. Because of the July 4th holiday, they also staffed the paramedic station on Middle Bass Island. They could be at the site in minutes.
Put-in-Bay, we've had a terrace collapse at Lonz Winery, Middle Bass Island. I'm going to tone out your squad and your fire department. Get them headed over that way.
If there were many people injured in the collapse, Chief Mark Wilhelm of the Put-in-Bay Volunteer Fire Department knew his staff would need help.
We didn't have enough people. We're basically on our own until we get outside help.
The rescue squad was only prepared for small holiday emergencies, but nothing of this magnitude. Phone lines all over the island were jammed with those seeking help.
911 emergency.
Many of the callers were hysterical. Reports were garbled and unclear.
Anybody hurt?
Still, the dispatcher knew she needed to get more help fast. She sent a helicopter paramedic team to the island.
Like we've had a terrace collapse at Middle Bass Island, Lonz Winery. We're going to need transport of EMS personnel.
Within minutes, the chopper was on its way. Ken Ruehle regained consciousness and realized he was pinned between chunks of concrete, unable to move.
I couldn't move, my arms were pinned down, and there was a lot of weight on me. I couldn't breathe real well. And I had, which actually I think saved my life, is I had a 50-gallon drum, which they were using for trash, that was up on the deck, was laying over my body, and then I had a big slab of concrete on top of it, and it had me pinned down. And there's a lot of dust settling in my face because I couldn't wipe it away or anything, and I couldn't see real well.
Put-in-bay rescue workers arrived to find the victims buried in the rubble. They couldn't tell how many people had been injured or trapped in the collapse. The helicopter pilot arrived over the island and saw the extent of the collapse. He advised dispatch to send out a mass casualty alert.
We've got mass casualty injuries on Middle Bass Island. We've had a terrace collapse at Lonz Winery. Do you have the mass casualty trailer there at your station?
As the dispatcher spread the alert, he landed a quarter-mile from the site. Julie Goins is a flight nurse for Life Flight.
We saw that there was a collapse at Middle Bass Island. All available crew report to Life Flight. I reported to the helipad where once I got there, the whole mood, you could tell that it was very serious.
From the hospital doors, it would take each helicopter 15 minutes to get to the island. The Coast Guard, on patrol in Lake Erie, was also dispatched to the scene. On board was Petty Officer and Medic Jennifer Zawistowski.
When we got that call, we knew we weren't coming back for a while. We were going to be out there and we were going to be doing our job and saving people as best as we can.
The Coast Guard took off at full speed. Even so, the 12-mile trip would take 20 minutes. They would arrive 6 minutes behind the helicopters. While rescue units launched from hospitals all over the area, rescue personnel from Put-in-Bay evacuated the injured. Victims were moved from the disaster site to a makeshift triage area. JoEllen Ruehle was one of the first patients evacuated from the scene. Both her lungs were punctured and her ribs protruded from her chest. JoEllen was afraid she was dying. She gave paramedics a message for her family.
I told her to tell, this part does bother me. I told her to tell both my sons that I loved them. That's probably the hardest, because I didn't know how bad I was. I didn't know if I was going to make it.
JoEllen was immobilized on a backboard. She needed to be taken to a trauma center quickly. Police cordoned off the area. Only rescue personnel were allowed in. Gary Rubleski was a college football coach vacationing on the island. He was also trained in first aid.
We need some powerful people down there because there's no cranes, there's no chains, there's nothing except human strength to pull these people out before they die.
Until rescue teams arrived from the mainland, local crews would have to rely on brute strength and common sense. Many of the injured had broken bones, severe cuts and lacerations. They had to be moved carefully.
And you've only got so much time, and if you move the concrete the wrong way and that pressure comes off those veins and arteries, the person could go into shock within probably 15 to 30 seconds. They are panicking, they're crying.
Flight nurse Julie Goins knew that time was critical.
We don't want to waste any time. For a trauma patient, they have a golden hour where you need to get them to the trauma centers.
For the victims, this brief but precious span of time could determine who would live and who would die. As helicopter crews raced to the scene, and before disaster became a tragedy. On July 1st, 2000, a festive afternoon of wine and music turned into a nightmare. At the popular Lonz Winery on an island in Lake Erie, a crowded terrace had collapsed. With no warning, dozens of people fell over 20 feet into an unused cellar. A fleet of rescue helicopters was dispatched to the winery within minutes of the first distress call.
Contact Cleveland air traffic controllers for me and get some airspace.
The sheriff's department knew that the number of emergency flights could jeopardize routine air traffic. Flight controllers in Cleveland had to clear the flight paths quickly. Dozens of commercial airliners were rerouted, and the life flight helicopters raced north across the Great Lake.
Can you give me a number?
Still, it was clear that a disaster of this magnitude could not be handled by the flights alone.
Hi, this is Sheriff's Office. We've got Catawba Fire en route with their mass casualty trailer. We've had a terrace collapse at Lonz's Winery. Can we get a ferry boat to transport that over there?
Ferries of all sizes were called into service to transport personnel and equipment. Chief Mark Wilhelm of the Put-in-Bay Volunteer Fire Department hurried to the dock and caught one of the first ferries to the island. As his 5-minute crossing began, the chief called for an update. It was worse than anyone had thought. Nearly 100 people had been injured, but the extent of their injuries was unknown. Many were still buried under tons of rubble.
We're going to need to stage approximately 20 to 25 squads somewhere down there in your parking lot area.
Critical patients like JoEllen Ruehle had to be evacuated quickly. JoEllen indicated to Nurse Linda Shull that she couldn't breathe. Her ribs were broken, and both her lungs had been punctured.
This paramedic said, I need you to put your hands on her chest because she has flail chest, and he was trying to tape her down to a board to help immobilize her chest. So I had my hands on her, and she was yelling and yelling at me because it hurt. And I told her I was sorry, and I could feel her bones moving under my hands. It was very eerie. It was very hard. I told her my name's Linda. I said, I'm going to be here with you. What's your name? My name's JoEllen. And she said, have you seen my husband, Ken?
In spite of her pain, all JoEllen really cared about was her children and her husband, Ken. The couple had been separated in the collapse.
I didn't know if I'd see Ken. I had no idea. I didn't know where he was.
JoEllen's chest had been crushed between huge concrete blocks. She was in excruciating pain. As paramedics struggled to stabilize her, she was desperate to know if her husband was safe or even alive. Linda Shull promised she would search for Ken and let him know JoEllen was on her way to the hospital. As the next wave of helicopters arrived, patients were moved from the triage area.
All of the critical and serious patients were taken up to the landing area, and they were getting there by ambulance, some were getting there by pickup trucks, some were getting there by a wagon.
Every second counted. rescue crews moved critical patients to the landing zone any way they could. JoEllen Ruehle was one of the first victims evacuated. Paramedics would stabilize her on board.
Our goal is to get them out of the scene as rapidly as possible. This was where we had to triage through the sickest and determine that they were the ones that needed to go first.
As the life flight helicopter raced for the mainland, JoEllen Ruehle could only think of her husband.
When I was on the helicopter looking out the window, I realized, where's Ken? Is he in the same shape I am? Is he alive? I had no idea.
At the same time, Linda rushed back into the collapse as she had promised.
On three, 1.
She found Ken Ruehle pinned under jagged slabs of concrete.
You got a medic out here? I was in a lot of pain, but I wasn't worried about my pain because I could breathe fine and I knew that I was going to make it at least. And I was worried about my wife because I didn't know where she was. And
he learned his wife was on her way to the mainland.
There's about 4 guys that lifted me over onto a board, a backboard, I guess it was, and they actually carried me out. And then they set us in the yard outside the winery, and they were checking us over then for injuries and if they could do anything at that particular time, they did.
As the number of severely injured grew, there were not enough helicopters available. Ken was taken to the dock for transport by ferry boat. The Coast Guard arrived on the scene just in time, according to Petty Officer Jennifer Zawistowski.
We got off the boat and it was just total chaos. I had a lady grab a hold of my shirt and said, "My husband can't breathe, he's having a hard time breathing." So it was kind of grab our bags and go and just start doing our thing. We really didn't, once we got onto the island, we really didn't have time to think about anything. We just had to react.
The Coast Guard assessed the situation and helped set up the triage area, allowing other rescuers to remove victims trapped in the rubble. With so many lives hanging in the balance, removing victims was difficult and stressful, even for a trained professional like Gary Robleski.
I mean, this concrete was heavy-duty weight, and you had to get like 5, 6, 7, 8 guys to pick up small pieces. When that pressure is relieved, the person could go right away into shock, because if their bones are crushed and their ribs are crushed into the lungs, and you take that pressure off, bango, okay? It's automatic shock. The person just fades right out. That's when those are the ones you have to rush out of there quickly.
Ferry boats had been dispatched to the island to drop off emergency equipment and transport patients back to the mainland. The first ferry boat approached the winery. As the captain turned his radio to emergency channel 16, he learned of the chaos awaiting him on the dock. Scores of walking wounded and the less severely injured waited to board the ship. Rescue vehicles moved out as less seriously injured victims were evacuated. The most serious cases were transported to the mainland by helicopter. Despite the chaos, and with dozens of rescue teams deployed, a system began to emerge.
When we were landing, it was amazing. There was just helicopters everywhere you could see. And they were lined up 5, 6 in a row at the landing strip. It was an assembly line. The helicopter would land, the crew would get out, we'd load 2 more in, we'd shut the doors, they'd be on their way. Another one would just be completing their loading process. In the meantime, another one would be landing. They were coming in, they were leaving. There was another one coming in. It was nonstop. There was never a break in the action where you were sitting around waiting for a helicopter.
In the triage area, rescue personnel questioned the victims. Many were disoriented and confused. This made the job more difficult and cost valuable time. Some patients were unable to talk at all. The more seriously injured had to be strapped to backboards and immobilized before they could be moved. Beth Roach struggled to respond to questions, but the pain was too great.
Are you having a hard time breathing? It was pain that I'd never experienced before, and hopefully won't again. Pain that, shooting pain. Just you know, if I try to put any pressure on my leg or foot at all, just shooting pain. And just if I tried to move it, that's why the biggest thing was trying to straighten it. If I tried to straighten it, I mean, let alone putting any weight on it. If I tried to straighten it, the pain would just shoot up through my side.
For paramedics, it was an indication that her pelvis had been crushed.
Pick her up on 3. 1, 2, 3.
They decided to put her on the next available flight out. Beth was moved to a waiting pickup truck. They had to hurry. She needed to be stabilized. But even the slightest movement was painful. The ride to the airstrip was torture. Every time the pickup went over a bump, she felt excruciating pain travel the length of her body.
I took a little truck ride to one helicopter. It was full. So then they took me to another helicopter and remarkably put me in the helicopter, and there was my friend. We were in the same helicopter. Rode in the same helicopter to the hospital, which was amazing to me because, you know, of all the people that were hurt, we ended up in the same helicopter.
The life flight helicopters raced back to the mainland. They had to get the patients to trauma centers before it was too late. On the afternoon of July 1st, 2000, an island resort in Ohio became the scene of a mass casualty incident. With no warning, the Lonz Winery terrace collapsed. Nearly 100 people were buried under an avalanche of concrete, tables, chairs, and twisted rebar. Medical helicopters transported the critically injured to the mainland. They were in a race against time. 4 area hospitals had been designated to receive trauma patients. They each had training programs and drilled for MCIs, or mass casualty incidents. Now, as the patients streamed in, they implemented MCI emergency procedures.
On a normal, stable patient, we wait till the blades shut down. We shut down both the engines. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes. Then we unload them with everything shut down. The day of the winery collapse, we unloaded everyone hot, which saves us a lot of time. When we arrive in the trauma room, you're met by probably 15 to 20 people for one patient.
The emergency room staff at St. Vincent Mercy Medical Center in Toledo, Ohio, had prepared for the worst. Still, it was impossible to predict the scope of the injuries, according to Dr. Scott Zgrabik.
I think part of being in the ER that all the ER doctors adapt to is that you have that fear every day, that there's going to be something that's going to come in at that moment that you're not going to be able to figure out quickly enough, or that you're not going to have the facilities for.
The first patient to arrive in the emergency room went into cardiac arrest.
You have a radial pulse.
Patient has heart tones.
Breath
Still
sound.
has breath sounds bilaterally.
Continue with it. ATL, everybody's clear. Abdomen.
In less than 3 minutes, the trauma team revived him.
Left face is unstable.
Pelvis is stable.
He has an obvious malocclusion.
Chest. 4 millimeters. How much you want to cross for? How much you want to cross for?
Chest wall is stable.
4 units.
There's no crepitus over his chest wall. Chest is.
Someone draw the ball.
There's small abrasion over his right left elbow.
The patient was going to survive. Minutes later, their next case arrived.
With every new patient that comes in the door, you're reprioritizing your entire ER. So if you had your priorities set up with your first 10 patients, as soon as that 11th hits the door, you have to reorganize everything again.
The next patient to arrive at St. Vincent Mercy Medical Center was JoEllen Ruehle. Concrete blocks had crushed her chest. Her ribs had been broken, puncturing her lungs. The ER staff held out hope that JoEllen Ruehle would survive. They x-rayed the patient's body and inserted tubes into her chest, allowing trapped air to escape from her lungs.
It was terrible. It was bad. I woke up and I was crying, and I had tubes everywhere all over me, but that was probably the worst.
At the site, volunteers and rescue workers evacuated the injured. They were extracted from tons of concrete and twisted metal and moved to triage areas and local hospitals as quickly as possible. Among the thousands gathered at the winery that day were many off-duty medical professionals. Their quick response in the minutes after the collapse and their assistance in prepping the trauma patients for their flights saved countless victims' lives. Ferryboats, summoned by radio, took pressure off air crews by transporting less seriously injured patients.
This is the Victory Rev. We're headed into the mainland dock. We've got injured person.
Scores of other victims arrived on the mainland by boat. They were placed into waiting ambulances and rushed to emergency rooms and makeshift trauma centers throughout the region. The fact that the victims had spent the day at a winery made diagnoses difficult.
When you have an intoxicated patient, they're an impaired patient. You can't take things at face value, because with the alcohol, it numbs your senses and your own judgment. And so what happens is, instead of being one patient, one exam, it's one patient, 2 or 3 exams. So instead of just doing 50 exams, you're doing 150 exams throughout the ER, just to keep on circling around and make sure that you didn't miss something or a distracting injury.
Magruder Hospital in Port Clinton, Ohio, is a 35-bed facility. 46 victims of the winery collapse flooded in slightly less than 2 hours.
Right, yeah, we got several patients. Hold on one second, Rich. We got several patients coming now.
Yeah, Magruder was this, I kind of imagine it like a MASH unit, like you see on TV. people running around, injured people was laying here, there, wherever, in the hallways. Some were limping around, some were on beds, couldn't be moved. Can't feel it.
About a dozen doctors and 50 other staff rushed to the hospital to tend to the victims. At times, they wondered how many more patients would arrive.
Can we go, Mom?
I thought I would stop seeing patients after a while, but they just kept coming.
Ken Ruehle was one of those sent to Magruder. X-rays revealed that one of his hands had nearly been torn off.
Let me listen to you again.
My wrist, as long as I didn't look at it, it was fine because it didn't look too good. It was turned back completely around, and they reset it at Magruder right away, and they put 5 pins in it.
Beth Roach was on a medical helicopter back on the mainland. Her vital signs were monitored closely on the flight. She was in critical condition. At Metro Health in Cleveland, ER doctors determined that she had sustained broken vertebrae and a shattered pelvis.
I heard them say they were going to send me into surgery, and that scared me because I was like, I've never been in surgery, you know, and I really was wanting my parents there, you know, before anything like that happened.
The damage to Beth's pelvis was extensive. Surgery couldn't wait. For doctors treating the injured, time itself had become an enemy. Scores of the seriously injured awaited transport to area hospitals. Rescue personnel on the scene hoped they could get them help in time. The constant roar of medical helicopters over Lake Erie was an unmistakable sign that something had gone very wrong on tiny Middle Bass Island. Patrons of the Lonz Winery drank and danced on the terrace. Just before 5 p.m., the unthinkable happened. The terrace collapsed beneath their feet. 100 people plunged 20 feet into a wine cellar. Emergency crews and volunteers worked non-stop, transporting victims to area trauma centers. They loaded victim after victim into air transports, working as quickly as possible. They had to make every second count.
We'll do a lot of interventions in the helicopter. We won't waste a lot of time on the ground doing things that we can do while we're en route to the hospital.
Cleveland Center, this is Life Flight 1. We are inbound with 2 patients. Stand by for blood typing and vital signs.
On board the rescue helicopters, paramedics worked non-stop to stabilize the patients. They started IVs to hydrate the victims and prevent shock. They matched blood types and radioed the results to waiting hospitals so blood supplies would be on hand when they arrived. After 90 minutes, the situation was under control. The most critically injured were placed on backboards and then quickly moved from the collapse site. Gary Robleski, a college football coach, assisted in the rescue. His first aid training and strength were valuable assets. But his compassion made this grim task more difficult.
Well, you've got to get the most severe out of there. And there's some people that, you know, they're calling for you. You get me out of here. You know, I don't want to die. I said, you have to wait. We have to get the most severe out. You know, you're talking. When a person's talking to you, okay, basically they're okay. Okay, you got to get the ones that are out, that you see the head injuries, that the pressure's on the concrete and stuff, that they're not making a sound. Those are the people that you see the limbs sticking out of the concrete pieces and the tables on top of them. You got to get those personnel out as fast as you can. And it's hard choice to not to help a person while they're trapped.
The rescuers' goal was to get the most severely injured out first, Victims with less severe injuries would have to wait.
So then we come back to you, I said, I'll be back, I'll be right back, I promise you. But they're sitting there and they're trying to reach for you, okay? And you can't be there to help them. And that's a very, very tough decision in anybody's life. It's critical.
Backboards were only used for those unable to walk on their own. Once the concrete slabs were lifted, anyone that could move under their own power was expected to do so, even if they needed additional help.
And that's when you have to really go with the flow. And you've got to separate your feelings and emotions and just get the job done.
Some of the remaining victims, people buried under the rubble, were unconscious. They appeared to be seriously injured. Coast Guard paramedics, including Petty Officer Jennifer Zawistowski, continued to assess each of the patient's injuries.
Once things started calming down, we regrouped and just kind of went through everybody else again and made sure everybody that needed to be off the island was off.
How are those backboards doing?
Supplies ran short. Emergency crews were forced to improvise everything from neck braces to bandages.
We ran out of everything. We used every kit from every boat that we had. We went through all the bandages, everything we went through. We had absolutely no more medical supplies here.
They even ran out of backboards. Rescue personnel pulled doors off the winery and taped patients to them for transport. About a dozen injured winery patrons were still being cared for in the triage area. But despite their efforts, the day was not a complete success. For flight nurse Julie Goins, it was bittersweet.
Losing one patient out of nearly 100 is still just as difficult as if it were one patient out of 5. It was very tough to lose that one man. After seeing the wreckage, I couldn't believe that we didn't lose more than one patient.
As afternoon fell on July 1st, 2000, the winery collapse had claimed its first victim. Emergency personnel from across northern Ohio were dispatched to the scene of a mass casualty incident. 100 people had been injured when the terrace of a winery collapsed. At the site, Chief Mark Wilhelm of the Put-in-Bay Fire Department brought in a dog to search for any hidden victims.
I checked all that area there. The only thing we gotta watch is things falling off.
None were found. Miraculously, only one man died in the collapse. Rescue efforts on the island were wrapping up.
When we were at the landing strip and we just had a few patients left, everybody kind of started to feel a big sense of relief. I think that's when it started to hit us, the magnitude of the incident.
But at hospitals on the mainland, the work had just begun. Nearly 100 people had been injured in the collapse, some of them seriously. Many were in intensive care units and had undergone surgery. Using trucks, ferry boats, and helicopters, 25 rescue teams had moved over 80 injured people to 4 area hospitals, all in 90 minutes. It was a textbook example of a successful rescue operation in a mass casualty incident. In the midst of the chaos, volunteers like Gary Robleski stayed at the scene until the end.
I stayed there till the last lady. I saw her and I was trying to comfort her just by talking to her and everything. We waited till the dust was coming and with the blades and everything. And when she flew away, that's when I just sat down on the grass and I said, I need a break.
At St. Vincent's Hospital, JoEllen Ruehle was still in danger. She needed surgery to repair a dislocated hip. Her punctured lungs would have to heal slowly on their own. She was kept under constant monitoring.
Certainly, we realized that she was somebody who was sick enough that might not make it. And a lot of times, initially, you don't even have a good idea of the extent of their injuries. On the other hand, the fact that she was awake and alert and able to move all of her extremities is reassuring to us.
At Magruder Hospital, a second examination of Ken Ruehle's x-rays revealed his back was broken. He would need further surgery.
If you have somebody that has an unstable spine, such as Ken, and he gets up and starts walking around, or it collapses further and pushes into the nerve roots, then you have paraplegia or nerve damage, and that would be worse than the disaster itself.
But Ken was only interested in finding his wife. In response to his persistent concern for JoEllen, the nursing staff had tracked her down at St. Vincent's. Despite the risk, Ken insisted on being transferred by ambulance to St. Vincent's so he could be with his wife.
My nurse asked me if I wanted to go up and see my wife. Of course, yeah, I haven't seen her for so long, and I wanted to see how she was doing. And it was good therapy for both of us to be able to see each other. They wheeled my bed up to her room, and neither one of us could hardly move, but eye contact was said a lot that day.
They reunited us then, and that was the first time I'd seen him. And they backed the beds up. We were feet to feet, and we both just did a high five to each other, and it was pretty emotional.
Today, JoEllen and Ken continue to deal with their injuries. Once avid exercise buffs, they sometimes find it difficult to get up in the morning. Still, they are grateful to be alive and to have each other.
You need to know what people have done for you, and without some of the people, you owe everything to them, you know, to be alive. I'm very grateful to all of them, because if not, I probably wouldn't be here.
There was so much help that came right after the accident. It was just almost like they were standing there waiting for it to happen. A lot of good help that came fast, which saved a lot of lives.
The training and quality of the emergency medical services and hospital trauma care has helped JoEllen and Ken rebuild their lives. A year later, Beth Roach helped arrange a gathering for survivors of the winery collapse to thank the medical and emergency workers for their dedication.
I know it's their job, but you're still very grateful for the help that they gave you. I mean, I've said it a few times, and I want to get that across, that how much I really appreciated what they did and how they stepped up, how things went down over there. I really don't think they could have done a better job.
The victims were not the only ones affected by the incident. The winery's former owner is still dealing with lawsuits that could mount into the millions of dollars. Engineers later determined that the deadly collapse of the concrete terrace at the winery was caused by a structural problem. The residents of the remote island are still trying to put the tragic events behind them.